You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of just absolute precision.
Right, like it's engineering or something.
Exactly. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, they take an x-ray, and you see that, that stark white line against the black background, and the doctor just points to the screen and is like, there it is, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's completely binary. Like it's either broken or it's not broken.
Yeah.
And honestly, human beings just neurologically crave that kind of binary categorization.
Oh, for sure.
We desperately want the world to be visible,
Right.
to be neat,
Yeah.
to be solvable with like a simple cast and 6 weeks of rest, because it soothes that anxiety of the unknown.
But then, you step out of the clinic and into the landscape of human behavior. You step into the landscape of your own daily life, your own mind, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Yeah, it's a completely different ballgame.
It is. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky because, we all wake up wanting to feel in control of our lives, right? But how often do you, and hey, I'm talking directly to the person listening to this right now, how often do you feel like you are just constantly reacting to the world around you?
Too often, probably.
Right. You wake up, you check your phone, and a stressful email from your boss immediately just dictates your entire mood for the morning. Or, someone cuts you off in traffic and your blood pressure physically spikes.
Oh, the traffic one is so real.
Just so real. Or like a coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment in a meeting and you spend the next 3 hours just simmering, replaying the conversation in your head.
Thinking of the perfect comeback.
Yes. Exactly. And in those moments, you aren't driving the car. You're just being violently bounced around in the passenger seat.
Which is the absolute definition of living by default rather than by design.
Yeah.
When you live that way, you basically become a thermometer.
Yeah.
You're simply reflecting the temperature of the room you happen to be in, rather than acting as a thermostat that actually sets the temperature.
I love that analogy.
And, the psychological toll of living as a thermometer is just immense. It leads to chronic stress, this deep feeling of helplessness, and ultimately burnout.
Which is the exact core issue we are tackling today. So, welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are looking at a truly massive, frankly fascinating stack of texts today.
It's a heavy stack.
It really is. We've got material covering the behavioral science and clinical psychology of habits. We have these profound historical, philosophical texts on deep personal effectiveness. And we even have texts that break down the ruthless, timeless strategies of human dynamics and power.
Which is a wild mix when you think about it.
It is. And our mission today, we are going to extract the absolute best nuggets of insight from all of these texts, synthesize them, and basically answer one massive life-altering question. How do you become a master of yourself?
And what makes this specific collection of texts so compelling is just the sheer diversity of their fundamental approaches.
Right.
Like you have some sections focusing purely on moral character, things like integrity, patience, humility.
The deeper truth.
Exactly, the virtues. But then you have other sections focused on sheer pragmatic power. How to maneuver socially, how to defend yourself against aggressive people, how to conceal your intentions.
The Machiavellian stuff.
Yeah, the gritty stuff. And alongside all of that, you have the clinical neurological science of how a habit loop literally physically functions inside the basal ganglia of the human brain.
It covers all the bases.
It really does. But despite coming from radically different disciplines, they all basically converge on one undeniable truth.
Which is?
You cannot possibly conquer the outside world, you can't sustainably influence others, and you cannot achieve lasting success until you have completely and utterly conquered your inner world.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is huge. Let's start right there at the foundation. Because if we're building an inner world, we really have to look at what materials we're actually using. And the texts make a massive distinction right out of the gate between just acting the part and actually being the part.
Yes, the personality versus character debate.
Exactly. They frame this as the difference between the personality ethic and the character ethic. And this feels incredibly relevant today because, well, modern society seems completely obsessed with the personality ethic.
Oh, entirely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this shift toward the personality ethic really took hold in the mid-20th century, particularly in post-war self-help literature.
Okay.
The personality ethic is basically the allure of the quick fix. It's the social Band-Aid.
Like fake it till you make it.
Exactly that. It teaches you communication tricks, power poses, how to fake interest in someone else's hobbies just so they'll like you, or how to use a specific tone of voice to sound authoritative in a boardroom.
Just managing perceptions.
Right. It's entirely focused on public image, charm, and the superficial lubrication of social interactions. The text actually refers to this as secondary greatness. It's the symbol of success without any of the actual substance.
It's life hack culture.
Exactly.
It's like, read this one book and learn the 5 magic phrases to make anyone instantly trust you. But the text contrasts this with the character ethic, which it calls primary greatness. And this is about foundational traits that, frankly, aren't glamorous at all.
They definitely aren't going viral on social media.
No, they do not yield overnight results. We're talking about deep-seated integrity, fidelity, courage, justice, and patience.
Right. And to really understand the functional difference between the two, let's look at the analogy the text provides about maps.
Oh, I really like this one.
Let's kind of co-create this for a second. So imagine you are traveling to Chicago for a critical meeting.
Okay, I'm going to Chicago.
And I hand you a map of the city. But due to a massive printing error at the factory, the map I actually gave you is a map of Detroit, even though it boldly says Chicago right on the cover.
So it's completely mislabeled.
Exactly. Now, what happens when you start trying to find your destination?
Well, I mean, I'd get hopelessly lost almost immediately. The streets just wouldn't match up with the signs.
Right. Now, let's say you apply the personality ethic to solve this problem. You focus on your behavior. You decide to take a time management class. You try harder. You become more diligent. You literally double your walking speed. What is the actual result?
I just get to the wrong place twice as fast. I'm just being efficiently lost.
Precisely. So then you try another layer of the personality ethic. You work on your attitude. You read a book on positive thinking. You tell yourself, I'm going to have a great time wherever I end up.
Yeah.
Every wrong turn is an adventure.
Okay, so now I'm still totally lost. I'm definitely missing my big meeting, but I guess I'm, like, smiling about it.
Yes, you've masked the symptom, but you totally ignored the disease. The fundamental problem has absolutely nothing to do with your behavior or your attitude.
Right.
It has everything to do with having the wrong map. That map is your paradigm. It's your underlying character. If your underlying paradigm is flawed, no amount of positive thinking, no amount of communication tricks, and no amount of behavioral hustle is ever going to get you to the right destination. You have to change the map.
Wow. That just makes the sheer exhaustion of faking it so apparent.
It is exhausting.
When you're operating on a Detroit map in Chicago, you have to constantly burn mental energy trying to reconcile why the world isn't reacting the way you expect it to.
Exactly.
Which ties perfectly into the agriculture analogy from the text. It points out that you cannot cram on a farm.
This is such a great visual.
It really is.
Okay.
Think about modern education. You can goof off all semester, ignore the readings, skip the lectures, and then the night before the final exam, you pull an all-nighter.
We've all been there.
Right. You memorize the tricks, you cram the formulas into your short-term memory, and you might actually get an A on the test. You can successfully fake your way through an artificial man-made system.
But try applying that exact same strategy to a natural system.
Exactly. You can't just forget to plant your seeds in the spring, play video games all summer, and then cram in the fall by running out to the field with a shovel and trying to hack a harvest out of the dirt overnight.
It defies the laws of physics and biology.
You literally have to plant the seed, water it, weed it, and wait. The process is just the process.
And the texts argue that human relationships and personal power are natural systems, not artificial ones.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you can absolutely use a personality trick to charm a stranger at a networking event for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That works. But in a long-term dynamic, whether that's a marriage, a decade-long business partnership, or, raising a teenager, if there is no deep character, no actual integrity, the true motives eventually surface.
You can't hide it forever.
No, because duplicity breeds distrust. The human brain is actually incredibly adept at detecting incongruence. If people sense you're using a technique on them, they feel manipulated and their defenses go up permanently.
But hold on, let me push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Because I hear the farm analogy, I totally understand the long game, but we live in a hyper-competitive, fast-paced world. What if I'm going into a high-stakes negotiation tomorrow, or I'm trying to close a massive deal that could literally save my company or frankly save my job?
Right, the immediate pressure.
Yeah. Isn't it infinitely more efficient and maybe even necessary in the short term to use a power tactic or a psychological trick to get the counterparty to sign the contract? If I lose my job tomorrow because I was too busy cultivating my deep character, the long game doesn't really matter.
That is a very real friction point, and the texts dealing with power dynamics actually address it head-on.
Huh.
Yes, in a strictly one-off transactional environment where you will literally never see the person again, cunning, force, or a flashy psychological technique can definitely secure a short-term win.
Okay, so the tactics do work.
If survival's on the line today, tactics matter. However, the counter-argument the texts make is about compounding returns.
Compounding return.
Yeah. If you rely on manipulation to survive, you build a reputation. And in any interconnected industry, your reputation always precedes you. Eventually, you run out of people who trust you enough to play the game with you. You end up spending more energy managing the fallout of your past manipulation than you do actually building value. True self-mastery is an inside-out approach. When you change your fundamental paradigm, when your character becomes solid, you don't actually need the flashy techniques anymore.
Because you're just genuinely trustworthy.
Exactly. Your baseline competence and trustworthiness do all the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, so it's about the silent, almost unconscious influence of a person's life. The constant radiation of what a person really is, rather than the exhausting performance of what they pretend to be.
That radiation is completely palpable. I mean, it's why you can meet two people who say the exact same words, but you inherently trust one and feel deeply suspicious of the other. Our brains process hundreds of micro-expressions and tonal shifts that reveal true character. And to prove how deeply these internal paradigms dictate our reality, the text actually references a classic psychological optical illusion.
Oh, the young woman and the old woman drawing. I love this example.
It's a classic for a reason.
So for you listening, depending on how your brain has been primed, you look at this black and white sketch, and you either see a beautiful young woman with a petite nose looking away over her shoulder, or you see a sad, older woman with a large hook nose looking down, kind of buried in a heavy coat.
And the clinical experiment the text describes using this image is fascinating. Researchers take a room full of students and split them right down the middle in half.
Okay.
They show one half a picture that heavily emphasizes the young woman, just for 10 seconds. They show the other half a picture emphasizing the old woman.
So they're priming them.
Exactly. Then they project the ambiguous combined sketch on the screen for the whole room to see at once. And what happens?
They argue vehemently.
Yes, they literally fight about it.
Right, because the people primed for the young woman cannot physically fathom how anyone is seeing an old hag. They're pointing at the screen saying, that's her necklace, that's her jawline.
And the people primed for the old woman think the other half is completely delusional. Like, what jawline? That's her giant nose.
And they are looking at the exact same physical black lines and white spaces. The sensory data hitting their retinas is identical, but their conditioning completely shapes how their brains interpret that data.
It perfectly illustrates that we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Wow.
Our internal maps completely dictate our external reality.
Which brings us to a massive roadblock because, okay, even if we agree that we need to build our character from the inside out, and even if we recognize our paradigms, we are still just biological creatures subject to intense, overwhelming emotions.
The biology always kicks in.
It does. You can have all the character and patience in the world, but when someone insults you to your face or steals your credit at work, your amygdala fires, the blood rushes to your head, and all those careful philosophical plans go straight out the window. So how do we handle that?
The convergence of the texts on this specific point is really striking. Whether you're reading behavioral science, ancient philosophy, or Machiavellian power dynamics, they all identify unmanaged emotional reactivity as the single greatest barrier to effectiveness.
The absolute biggest hurdle.
Yeah. And the text dealing specifically with power is ruthless about this. It states unequivocally that anger and petulance are never signs of strength or intimidation. They are actually comical signs of helplessness.
That reframing is so powerful because we usually think of the guy screaming in the boardroom, slamming his fist on the table as the one wielding the power, like he's dominating the space.
It's an alpha stereotype.
Exactly. But the text says that angry people usually end up looking ridiculous because their response is so wildly out of proportion to the stimulus. They believe their tantrums signify dominance, but everyone else in the room is just secretly losing respect for them.
They're watching a toddler.
Yes, the people watching realize, oh, This guy has no internal control. I know exactly what buttons to push to make him lose his mind. And if you can't control your own nervous system, how can you possibly control a complex situation?
You can't. And this is the physiological difference between proactivity and reactivity, which goes right back to our thermometer versus thermostat analogy.
Okay, break that down.
A reactive person's emotional state is entirely dependent on the social weather. If someone praises them, they feel euphoric. If someone critiques them, they become deeply defensive and hostile. They build their entire emotional equilibrium around the unpredictable behavior of others.
Which is a terrifyingly fragile way to live.
Extremely fragile. Proactive people, on the other hand, carry their own weather. Whether it rains or shines, whether they are insulted or praised, their internal value system remains steady.
And the texts don't just offer this as, like, a nice theory. They back it up with one of the most intense historical case studies imaginable. It details the experience of a prominent psychiatrist who was imprisoned in the death camps of World War II.
The extremity of that environment truly cannot be overstated. He had his entire identity stripped from him. His life's work was destroyed. His family perished in the camps. He suffered unimaginable physical torture, starvation, and indignity.
Just absolute horror.
He existed in a state where he didn't know from 1 hour to the next if he would be sent to the gas chambers. It was the most restrictive, oppressive, externally controlled environment a human being could ever endure.
And yet, in the midst of that absolute darkness, while standing naked in a small room, he realized something that literally changed the course of modern psychology. He realized he possessed what he called the last of the human freedoms.
The last freedom.
Yeah. The guards could control his physical environment. They could dictate his schedule. They could inflict pain on his body. But as a self-aware being, he could observe his situation from a slight mental distance. He could decide internally how all of this was going to affect his core identity.
He discovered the gap.
The gap.
The realization was this. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose. That single sentence is arguably the most critical realization in the entire pursuit of self-mastery.
It's profound.
He used his imagination to project himself out of that cell. He would picture himself standing in a warm, well-lit lecture hall after the war, teaching his future students about the profound psychological lessons he was learning right there in the camp. By exercising that tiny microscopic freedom to choose his internal response, he expanded his inner power until he possessed more psychological freedom than his actual captors.
Who were ironically enslaved by their own reactive cruelty. I picture it like a match being struck next to a stick of dynamite. The stimulant, the insult, the bad news, the crazy traffic, that is the match. The response is the explosion.
Right.
Most of us just explode the second the match is struck. Someone critiques our work, we instantly fire back an aggressive email. The gap doesn't even exist for us. But true self-mastery is being able to mentally pinch the fuse before the spark hits the powder.
Pinch the fuse. I like that.
It's finding that microsecond gap, observing your own rising heart rate, standing back from yourself and saying, I'm experiencing anger, but I am not my anger. I don't have to explode just because the match was struck.
Yeah?
So I have to ask you, the listener, right now, how often do you let someone else's bad mood ruin your entire day? Why are you handing them the remote control to your emotions?
And to take that further, let's look at how this psychological gap translates directly into pragmatic power. The texts on strategy advise that when someone pushes you or acts aggressively, your biological instinct is obviously to push back.
Fight or flight.
Right, you want to meet force with force. But the most powerful disorienting response is often to yield, to bend, to deliberately choose not to react.
Okay, wait. Turning the other cheek as a power move? That sounds like a recipe for getting walked all over. If someone attacks me in a meeting and I just sit there and yield, doesn't that just signal weakness? Doesn't that mean they won?
It's not passive submission. It is a highly calculated surrender.
Okay.
It's psychological judo. Think about the mechanics of aggression. When someone baits you, they're expending energy, and they expect, and usually desperately want you, to react with equal force. Your reaction validates their anger.
It proves they got to you.
Exactly. It pulls you into their emotional whirlpool where they feel comfortable fighting.
Right.
But if you stay completely calm, if you acknowledge their point without raising your voice, or if you simply let their aggressive comment hang in the air with a moment of dead silence, you catch them entirely off guard.
You literally starve the fire of oxygen.
Exactly. You neutralize their momentum. By not resisting in the way they expect, You take complete control of the dynamic. You force them to react to your calmness.
Oh, and there is nothing worse when you're mad.
It is profoundly infuriating and disorienting to a highly reactive person when their target just refuses to get upset. You maintain the initiative, your heart rate stays low, and you retain the clarity to maneuver while they are blinded by their own adrenaline. The one who controls their emotions controls the room.
That's a brilliant way to frame it. Petulance is not power. But let's be totally honest for a second. Recognizing this gap between stimulus and response, pinching the fuse of the dynamite, it is a beautiful, elegant concept when you're just listening to us talk about it.
Oh, for sure.
But it is incredibly hard in practice when the blood is actually pounding in your ears and someone threatens your livelihood. Finding that gap feels biologically impossible. So how do we actually reprogram our brains to choose the right response automatically? How do we build the capacity to find the gap?
And that leads us out of philosophy and directly into the behavioral science texts, the actual neurological mechanics of how we function.
Let's get into the machinery.
This is a necessary transition because you cannot simply philosophize your way to self-mastery. You have to understand the physical machinery you're operating. The texts break human behavior down into a foundational neurological loop, the habit loop.
Right.
It consists of 3 specific sequential parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward.
Okay, let's assume our listeners are fairly familiar with the basic concept of a habit loop, like cue, routine, reward is pretty standard pop psychology at this point.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
But the texts dive much deeper into why the brain actually does this.
Right. It's basically about energy conservation at the level of the basal ganglia.
The basal ganglia.
Yes. The human brain consumes a massive amount of the body's glucose. Conscious decision-making, which happens in the prefrontal cortex, is incredibly energy-intensive. If you had to consciously decide how to tie your shoes, how to back your car out of the driveway, and how to process every single social interaction, your brain would exhaust its energy supply by like 10 in the morning.
You just crash.
So the brain evolved a mechanism to offload repetitive sequences to the basal ganglia, which is a much older, deeper part of the brain. Once a habit loop is fully formed, the prefrontal cortex basically powers down. The brain just stops participating in decision-making.
That's wild.
It's why you can drive home from work, pull in your driveway, and realize you have absolutely no memory of the last 20 minutes of the commute.
Highway hypnosis.
Exactly. The driving habit loop took over completely.
The autopilot engaged. But this autopilot is also what runs all our bad habits. And the text gives a highly relatable example to illustrate how to hack this machinery. Let's say you have a bad habit of going to the office cafeteria every mid-afternoon to eat a massive chocolate chip cookie.
It happens to the best of us.
Right. It's adding to your waistline. You desperately want to stop. You make promises to yourself every single morning. But every day, like clockwork, 3 p.m. rolls around, and you find yourself standing at the counter buying the cookie. You didn't even consciously decide to go. Your feet just took you there.
The mistake people make here is trying to use brute force willpower to fight the entire loop.
Just white-knuckling it.
Yeah. They try to fight the cue, like ignoring the time of day, or they try to deny themselves the reward entirely. But the crucial insight from the science of habits is that you cannot extinguish a bad habit. You can only override it.
Override it.
The golden rule of habit change is this: keep the same cue, deliver the same reward, but insert a new routine.
Which requires deeply analyzing what the reward actually is. Like, are you eating the cookie because your blood sugar is low and you are genuinely physically hungry? Or are you eating the cookie because you crave the social break of chatting with coworkers in the cafeteria? Or maybe your brain just needs a burst of novelty and stimulation to break up the monotonous boredom of staring at a spreadsheet for 3 hours.
The text suggests experimenting with different rewards to isolate the actual craving. If you realize that the reward your brain is really seeking is just the social interruption, then the sugar is completely irrelevant.
The cookie is just an excuse.
Exactly. You keep the cue, it's 3 p.m., you feel fatigued, and you keep the reward, which is a social break.
Yeah.
But you swap the routine. Instead of walking to the cafeteria for a cookie, you take a quick walk to a coworker's desk to chat for 3 minutes. You satisfy the neurological craving without the destructive behavior.
The smoking example in the text really highlights this too. Many smokers eventually realize they don't actually crave the nicotine itself as much as they crave the deep, structured breathing, or the excuse to step outside, or just the burst of physical stimulation.
It's the ritual.
It's the ritual. If they identify the specific reward, they can swap the cigarette routine for a quick series of push-ups, or chewing a piece of strong cinnamon gum, or a short walk outside. The habit loop remains perfectly intact, but the destructive routine is swapped.
But to build on that, while we have hundreds of these micro-habits running all day long, the text isolates one specific habit as the ultimate keystone to self-mastery,
A big one.
the habit that acts as the foundation for all others, willpower.
And this is where the texts completely reframe how we think about success, because we usually associate massive success with raw talent or, a high IQ. But there was a fascinating study detailed in the text involving 8th graders that shatters that assumption entirely.
It really does.
Researchers measured a comprehensive set of variables in these kids, their IQ scores, their socioeconomic background, and their willpower, which they quantified through rigorous tests of self-discipline and delayed gratification.
And the results were definitive. The highly self-disciplined adolescents completely outperformed their more impulsive peers on every single academic metric.
Every single one.
They had higher grades, they gained admission to more selective schools, they had fewer absences, they spent less time watching television, and they spent more hours doing homework. Self-discipline predicted academic performance far more robustly than raw IQ did.
Which is crazy to think about.
Intellectual talent mattered significantly less than the sheer cultivated habit of willpower.
But hearing that, it brings up an immediate functional question. If willpower is the key, how does it actually work? Is willpower a finite resource?
Like a battery.
Yeah, we hear a lot about decision fatigue, like, do you wake up with a full tank of willpower, and once you use it up resisting a donut at breakfast and staying calm in a morning meeting, your tank is empty, and you have no willpower left to be patient with your kids at dinner? Or is willpower a muscle that actually gets stronger and larger the more you exercise it?
The text provides incredible evidence that while willpower can be temporarily depleted in the short term, which is what we call decision fatigue over the long term, it operates exactly like a muscle.
Okay, so it grows.
It does. And the most profound aspect of this muscle is cross-domain spillover.
Cross-domain spillover.
Yes. When you strengthen your willpower in one specific isolated area of your life, that neurological strength organically spills over into completely unrelated areas.
The financial management study, this blew my mind.
It's a perfect illustration of this. Researchers took a group of people who historically struggled with self-control and put them into a strict money management program. The program required them to meticulously track their spending, deny themselves impulse purchases, and save a specific amount of money every month.
So very rigid.
Very rigid. It required them to flex their willpower muscle daily, but strictly in the financial domain. Naturally, after a few months, their finances improved. But the astonishing part was what happened outside of their wallets.
They organically started smoking less. They
Yeah.
drank less alcohol, they consumed less caffeine, they ate less junk food. They even reported being more productive at work and more emotionally regulated at home.
It's incredible.
Just by tracking their money and building the discipline muscle in that one specific arena, the strength spilled over into everything else. They didn't sign up for a diet, they didn't go to couples therapy, and they didn't take a smoking cessation class. They just built the willpower muscle, and suddenly the prefrontal cortex had the strength to pinch the fuse on all their other bad habits.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's take stock of where we are. We've established the need for a foundational inner character instead of cheap personality traits. We recognize the profound gap between stimulus and response to control our emotional reactions. And we understand the neurological mechanics of hacking our habit loops to build the massive muscle of willpower.
Right.
But here's my frustration with all of this. If I do all of this, I have a massive amount of raw energy and internal control. I'm not eating the cookie. I'm not yelling at traffic. My finances are in perfect order.
Sounds great so far.
Right, but I could easily just feel like a highly disciplined, highly efficient robot. I have this incredible engine, but I don't have a steering wheel. Where do we point all this energy? If you have all this self-mastery, what are you mastering yourself for?
That feeling of being a disciplined robot is incredibly common when people focus solely on habits without a higher purpose. And that leads us to the conceptual principle that all things are created twice.
Created twice.
There is always a mental, or first creation, and a physical, or second creation. Think about building a house. You would never just buy a massive pile of lumber, walk onto an empty dirt lot and start randomly hammering nails together, hoping a house forms.
That would be a disaster.
You would create a blueprint first. You would work out the exact dimensions, the layout of the rooms, the structural integrity of the foundation.
Okay.
You do the agonizing, detailed mental work first. And only then does the physical construction follow.
Yet almost all of us live our actual lives without a blueprint. We just wake up, drink our coffee, and start hammering nails, reacting to whatever emails or crises happen to hit us that day. And the danger is if you don't draw your own blueprint, someone else is going to draw it for you.
Default scripting.
Yeah. We let our parents' expectations or the cultural definition of success or our corporate bosses write our scripts for us by default.
Mastering yourself means taking deliberate, conscious control of that first creation. You have to recognize the scripts you have inherited. The text calls the active process of taking back the pen re-scripting. And to help you break through the superficial noise of daily life to figure out what your script should actually say, the text offers one of the most intense, visceral visualization exercises I've ever encountered.
Yes, the funeral exercise. I want you, the listener, to actually try this.
It's intense.
The text asks you to clear your mind, get to a quiet place, and vividly imagine you are walking into a funeral parlor. You see the floral arrangements, you hear the soft organ music playing, you feel the shared sorrow in the room. You walk down the aisle, you approach the casket, you look inside, and you suddenly come face to face with yourself.
It is your funeral, exactly 3 years from today.
3 years from now. You take a seat in the pews and you look at the program in your hands. There are 4 speakers scheduled.
Okay.
The first speaker is from your immediate family, your spouse, your children, your siblings. The second speaker is a close, lifelong friend. The third speaker is someone from your work or profession. And the fourth speaker is from your community or your church. Now, the text asks the ultimate clarifying question. What do you want each of these specific speakers to say about you and your life?
Right.
What kind of character would you like them to have seen in you? What specific contributions do you want them to remember? What achievements actually matter in that room?
It is a profoundly uncomfortable exercise because it forces you to confront your own mortality, which strips away all the urgent but unimportant anxieties we carry.
Yeah.
Subtly, answering emails at 9 p.m. on a Friday doesn't really seem like a priority.
Not at all.
Whatever you want those 4 speakers to say, that is your authentic core definition of success. That is the right wall to lean your ladder against. You capture those answers, you reverse engineer those eulogies, and that becomes your personal constitution. That is the blueprint for your first creation.
And the text provides a stunning, high-stakes historical example of this kind of rescripting. It details the journey of a political leader who was imprisoned in solitary confinement, specifically in Cell 54.
Right.
For decades, he had been raised and deeply scripted with a burning, justified hatred for his political enemies who had instituted an incredibly oppressive regime. That hatred was his entire identity. It was basically the engine of his survival.
But while enduring the sensory deprivation of that solitary cell, he had a profound realization. He realized that true, lasting success is ultimately success with self. He learned to vacate his own mind, to look at his internal scripts objectively from that gap between stimulus and response we talked about. He realized that the script of sheer hatred he was living out, while completely understandable, was ultimately destructive. It ignored the interdependent reality of his nation's future. If he led with hatred, the country would burn.
So, using his imagination and his conscience, he did the agonizing work of rescripting himself. He deliberately dropped his deep-seated hatred. And decades later, when he was finally released and became the leader of his country, he used that exact new script to forge a historic, unprecedented peace and reconciliation process that literally changed the trajectory of the world.
He changed the physical world because he first did the agonizing work of changing the mental script inside his own mind in Cell 54.
Which perfectly transitions into the wrong jungle analogy from the text. This highlights the difference between management and leadership.
Oh, I love this visual.
Imagine a group of producers cutting their way through a dense, hostile jungle with machetes. They are the problem solvers. They are clearing the undergrowth, making incredible time, working up a sweat. Right behind them are the managers.
Keeping everyone organized?
Yes. The managers are writing policy manuals. They are implementing muscle-building programs for the machete swingers. They are creating efficient work schedules. They're being incredibly productive and efficient.
But the leader is the one who stops, climbs the tallest tree, surveys the entire landscape, and yells down to the group, "Wrong jungle."
And what do the highly efficient managers and workers yell back? Shut up, we're making progress.
Mhm.
It's so painfully true to corporate and personal life. Are you just busy being efficient, or are you actually being effective? If your ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, every step you take just gets you to the wrong place faster.
And this concept of the blueprint, of knowing exactly what jungle you are in, connects seamlessly to the laws of power mentioned in the other texts. One of the primary strategic laws of power is to concentrate your forces.
Concentrate your forces.
The text warns that intensity always defeats extensity. Masterful people do not flit from one shallow mind to another, constantly distracted by the next shiny object, the next trend, or the next urgent email. They find a single rich mine and they dig deep.
They mold their own character like clay and focus their energy intensely on a single, well-defined blueprint. They aggressively conserve their forces. They don't waste emotional energy arguing with people who don't matter on the internet, and they don't waste time reacting to every minor slight. They have the blueprint, and they execute it with concentrated, laser-like force.
But here we hit another major vulnerability. Digging that deep mine, executing that blueprint, maintaining that level of emotional control and willpower, it requires incredible stamina, which brings us to the very real threat of burnout.
Yeah.
How do you play this intense long game without physically and psychologically breaking down?
Exactly, because everything we've talked about so far, pinching the fuse on your anger, hacking your neurological habits, constantly concentrating your forces, it takes massive amounts of glucose and emotional energy. And to solve this, the text introduces this brilliant stabilizing concept, the PPC balance, production versus production capability.
It anchors this concept in the classic Aesop fable of the goose and the golden egg. A poor, struggling farmer walks into his barn one day and discovers his pet goose has laid a glittering, solid golden egg.
A miracle.
The next day, he finds another golden egg. He rapidly becomes fabulously wealthy. But with wealth comes greed, arrogance, and impatience. He can't wait for just one egg a day. He wants all the capital immediately. So he makes a calculated decision to cut the goose open to get all the gold out at once.
But of course, the goose is just a goose. It's empty inside, and now it's dead. In his rush for immediate results, he completely destroyed the asset that produced the results.
And this is the exact definition of true effectiveness. It is a delicate balance of two things. What is produced, the golden eggs, which we call P for production, and the health of the producing asset itself, or the capacity to produce, the goose, which is PC, or production capability.
Right.
If you only focus on getting golden eggs, whether that's closing sales, keeping a spotless house, cramming for exams, or finishing projects, and you neglect the health of the goose, you will inevitably lose the ability to produce anything at all. You'll burn out, get sick, or destroy your relationships.
And the revelation here is that you are the goose. To be a master of yourself, you have to fiercely protect yourself. You have to maintain your own machinery.
The texts on power absolutely echo this. Power is inherently a long-term game. The people who burn out and lose their positions are the ones seduced by the anxiety of quick victories, the ones who try to cram on the farm.
They exhaust themselves.
True masters, according to the strategic texts, cultivate an aura of stepping back. They act formless. They let others rush around, overreact, and exhaust themselves chasing golden eggs while the master preserves their own energy. As the text literally says, patience is the supreme virtue of the gods who have nothing but time.
So how do we practically protect the goose? How do we maintain this balance? The text calls it sharpening the saw. Imagine you come across a guy in the woods who has been frantically sawing down a tree for 5 straight hours. He is exhausted, drenched in sweat, and making almost no progress because the blade is totally dull.
Okay.
You tap him on the shoulder and say, "Why don't you take a 15-minute break and sharpen that saw?" And he snaps back, "I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy sawing."
It is the ultimate tragic foolishness of neglecting the PC balance. Sharpening the saw means engaging in daily, deliberate renewal. But the texts point out that we don't do this because of how our brains process time and urgency. To understand this, we have to look at the time management matrix the text provides, which divides our activities into 4 quadrants based on 2 metrics: urgency and importance.
Right, let's break that down because this is crucial. Quadrant first is urgent and important. This is the crisis quadrant. The kitchen is literally on fire. You have a deadline in 1 hour. Your kid broke their arm.
Emergency mode.
Quadrant fourth is urgent but not important. This is the deception quadrant. Your phone rings, a coworker drops by your desk to chat, an email pops up demanding an immediate reply. It feels pressing, but it doesn't actually advance your blueprint.
It's just noise.
And quadrant third is not urgent and not important. This is purely escape. Scrolling social media for 3 hours, binge watching television.
The problem is that human biology is addicted to urgency. We get a dopamine hit from putting out fires in quadrant 1, and we totally mistake the frantic motion of quadrant 3 for actual productivity. And when we get exhausted from living in those urgent quadrants, we escape to the numbing comfort of quadrant 3. But sharpening the saw lives entirely in quadrant 2. Activities that are deeply important, but absolutely not urgent.
There is no external alarm bell telling you to go to the gym. There is no flashing red light telling you to read a philosophical text or to meditate or to spend quality time with your spouse. If you don't do it today, nothing catches on fire. But if you neglect quadrant 2 for a decade, your life falls apart.
Exactly. Sharpening the saw in quadrant 2 requires renewal in 4 specific interrelated dimensions: physical, mental, spiritual, and social-emotional. Physical renewal is obvious: cardiovascular exercise, eating nutrient-dense food, prioritizing deep sleep. Mental renewal is reading challenging literature, planning, organizing, and visualizing your blueprint so your mind remains sharp. Spiritual renewal is whatever deeply centers your value system. It could be meditation, prayer, walking in nature, or listening to profound music. And social-emotional renewal involves proactively connecting with others, seeking to deeply understand them, and contributing to their lives without expecting immediate return.
So bringing this back to the real world, am I really supposed to take a full hour out of my insanely busy, productive, golden egg chasing day just to sit quietly, go for a run, or read a book, when I have 100 unread emails and my boss is demanding a report?
Absolutely. The text refers to this non-negotiable hour as the daily private victory. It is the ultimate act of proactivity. You are consciously deciding to invest in the engine rather than just driving the car until it literally seizes up on the side of the highway.
You have to do it.
The text guarantees that dedicating just 1 hour a day to this quadrant 2 private victory will profoundly impact the quality, clarity, and effectiveness of the other 23 hours. It deposits deep security into your internal psychological bank account. It lowers your baseline cortisol levels, which physically gives your prefrontal cortex the space to remember the gap between stimulus and response when the crises actually do happen.
It is the daily mandatory calibration of the thermostat, because if you don't actively calibrate the thermostat, you will inevitably revert to being a reactive thermometer.
That is exactly the mechanism.
So bringing this all together to you, the listener, what is the ultimate combined blueprint for self-mastery that we've pulled from this incredible stack of source material? First, you must realize that everything starts from the inside out.
Right.
Your paradigm, your map must be accurate before you start driving. Secondary greatness, the charm and the tricks, will ultimately fail without the primary greatness of deep character.
Essential.
Second, you have to intimately recognize the gap between stimulus and response. You are experiencing emotions, but you are not your emotions. You possess the uniquely human power to observe your situation and actively choose your reaction. When someone strikes the match, you have the power to pinch the fuse on your anger. And tactically, yielding and staying calm isn't weakness, it is the ultimate psychological judo.
Perfectly said.
Third, you have to hack your own neurological machinery. Identify the cues and the underlying rewards of your bad habits and consciously swap out the routines. And focus intensely on building the overarching muscle of willpower, because the discipline you build in one area will magically spill over into every single aspect of your life.
The cross-domain spillover.
Exactly. Fourth, realize that all things are created twice. Write your own script with the end in mind. Do the uncomfortable work of visualizing your funeral. Figure out what you want them to say, and make that your personal constitution. Don't hack your way efficiently through the wrong jungle. Concentrate your forces on the right one.
Find the right wall.
And finally, you have to protect the goose. Play the long game. You must prioritize quadrant 2 and take that hour a day for your daily private victory to sharpen the saw, renewing yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally.
It is a remarkable, comprehensive synthesis of how to operate as a human being. And I really want to leave you with a final provocative thought that bridges the deep philosophy of character with the raw, pragmatic dynamics of power we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
We spend so much time in our modern lives trying to desperately manipulate the external world to our liking. We fight ideological battles on social media, we argue aggressively in meetings, we try to constantly outmaneuver our rivals, we raise our voices, and we desperately try to control the room so we can feel momentarily secure. But what if the ultimate flex of power in the modern world isn't controlling the room at all? What if the absolute pinnacle of self-mastery is simply sitting quietly in that room, entirely secure in the character you have actively, deliberately created for yourself? What if true, unassailable power is needing absolutely nothing from the people who are frantically trying to provoke you?
Oh, wow. That is chilling in the absolute best way. Imagine the sheer psychological dominance of just sitting there, totally unbothered, your fuse completely pinched, watching everyone else in the room explode like dynamite while you just quietly, peacefully own your inner world. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We challenge you to claim your gap, draw your blueprint, and start your own daily private victory tomorrow morning. We will see you on the next deep dive.